Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is Human Settlements Planning, and the topic we are looking into is the introduction of the subject. The topics we will be discussing are nature shells, network and linkages, anatomy and classification of human settlements. If we look at the elements of structure of any urban structure, in conventional planning, the elements of structure are described in terms of circulation networks, public transport systems, open spaces, public facilities, and public utilities, which is nothing but your engineering services. However, in the context of spontaneous settlement making, it's useful to describe the structural element as connection, space, public institution, and utility services, and we'll be discussing this in a detail now. Connection refers to the movement of all kinds, which is fixed line systems such as roads, light and heavy railway systems, underground railway systems, as well as pedestrian and bicycle routes. As a general principle, movement should be seen as an activity which occurs within a space. It is primarily within this network of movement spaces that the public life of a community takes place. Consequently, its making should be informed not only by technocratic considerations but also by human and environmental considerations. Space lies at the heart of the non-programmatic approach to settlement making. It is not just one element of a settlement program, such as a public open space, but should be approached as a part of thinking about the whole. Settlements are usually characterized by diversity. They are many placed places. Some parts are more public, others are more private, while others are more neutral, serving broader, more diverse sets of citizens and urban activities. Space becomes particularly significant when one is considering movement at a local scale. At this scale, the concept of road needs to be replaced by the concept of providing spaces which are comfortable for people to be in and within which movement can take place. In spaces so conceived, neither the pedestrian nor the vehicle has complete dominance or right of way. Public institutions. Historically, the institutions which were most valued by society, such as institutions of learning, worship, exchange, markets, and universities, served as the key structuring elements of a settlement. The siting of these in turn formed the basis for locational choices of other more private uses such as housing. It is considered important to revive this tradition. At initial settlements patterns, if you look at it, it is first the government buildings would be placed around which the entire town would develop or the settlement would develop. But the current towns that are developing, we don't give importance to the public institutional buildings. Instead, we give importance to either the commercial district or the residential district. But we should go back. There are thoughts that say we should go back to a stage where we give importance to the public institution buildings. It is only then that these buildings, as well as the spaces that are surrounding it, will serve better to the public. The location of institutions in relation to the other elements of structure is also of very critical importance. Commonly, institutions occur in central places which are easily accessible in terms of movement patterns and are announced by public spaces. The institutions abutting onto such spaces give it unique character to the space and often attracts informal activities. which is very much important for a good living settlement. When public can congregate in a place at the end of the day and have a sensible discussion, it's considered a good settlement because it offers for public interaction. Public utility services. Public utility services refers to those engineering services that are essentially very important to the functioning of such settlements. These include water provision, sewage control, stormwater disposal, solid waste removal, and electricity supply. These services are essential to the maintenance of public health in settlements. As a general principle, utility services should be provided as efficiently, as cost effectively as possible, taking due cognizance of the fact that human and nature centered approach to settlement making proposed herein. So that's what is very important. Without public utilities, you cannot have any settlement thrive. That is obviously a very important factor, but it has to be done ecologically, efficiently, as well as cost effectively. Finally, network. Movement networks are defined broadly as public right-of-way networks accommodating land-based movement by range of movement nodes. Earlier guidelines have referred to movement networks as road layouts. Local movement networks are made of links and junctions of public rights-of-way or reserves. These links and junctions contain overlaid systems for different movement nodes, including footways, roadways, pathways, cycleways, and sometimes even railways. Now, if you consider the first thing, the public right-of-way networks, as opposed to the road layouts, these are the focus of planning and design. Reference to conventional road classifications such as access roads, collectors, local distributors, or arterials is avoided to prevent preconception notions regarding these functions and cross-section of any particular public right-of-way. And finally, continuous, pedestrian-friendly public right-of-way networks are promoted ahead of conventional discontinuous suburban road layouts. Now we move on to anatomy and classification of human settlements. The descriptive study of human settlements also analyzes the anatomy of the settlement. Settlements or parts of settlements can be classified according to their degree of functional homogeneity, the type and number of central place functions, the circulatory patterns found within the settlement, or any special function or purpose observable in the settlement. The main purpose or function of a settlement can serve to categorize the settlement as a homogeneous region, such as a single farmstead classified as a homogeneous agricultural region, or a bedroom community identified as a homogeneous residential region. So we have to compare and analyze what kind of settlement it's going to be as it is developing, because only then can you go about placing the different functions and circulatory patterns depending on the kind of settlement we are hoping for. Human settlements can be identified as central places that function as marketplaces, administrative centers, social and cultural meeting places, surrounding the hinterlands or surrounding areas. Circulatory patterns unite settlements by providing transport of people, goods, and information along lines of circulation such as roads. Nodal regions or settlements often form at these intersections of circulatory lines. Unique functions observable within a settlement sometimes are identified as a special settlement area, such as an army camp with a large residential settlement or a large factory or business in the midst of a relatively homogeneous residential area. Most human settlements possess some form of these types at some geographical scale. If you look at the different classification of human settlements, you can classify them based on number of factors: by acoustic units, by acoustics elements, by acoustics functions, by evolutionary phases, by factors and disciplines. If you look at this first classification based on sizes, small and sparsely spaced, which are basically rural settlements of villages specializing in agriculture. Then you have the large and closely knit spaces, which are the urban settlements specializing in secondary and tertiary activities. Then you have based on location of settlements, which is plains, mountains, coastal areas, etc. Based on physical forms, such as forms as the expression of content, function as well as structure, based on the 5 elements of human settlements. If you look at based on functions, which are most important to understanding what is the kind of meaning and role behind that kind of settlement, reveal the nature, specialization and the main reason of why this settlement has come into being. Based on activity, the activity could be social or economic, their performance or special role, such as dormitories, retirement villages, or is it going to be a touristy town, etc. Based on the dimension of time, that is age of settlements, their place in the past, future or present, what kind, how old is that settlement, their relative static of dynamic character, the whole process of their growth. Which process or which stage is that settlement in? Is it in the nascent stage? Is it in the birth stage? Is it in the growth stage, or is it close to the decay stage? Based on degree of society's conscious involvement in settlements creation, that is natural as well as planned settlements, based on institutions, legislations and administrations which society has created for settlements. Now, by echistic units you have 4 basic groups: minor shells or elementary units, which is basically the room, the house where an individual man or a family could stay. Micro settlements, units smaller than or as small as the traditional town, where people used to and still do achieve a certain amount of interconnection by walking, or a small neighborhood is what we are talking about here. Meso settlements, between traditional town and conurbation, which one can commute on a daily basis, that is a small polis, either a small polis, a polis, small metropolis or a small epiropolis. Macro settlements is whose largest possible expression is the ecumenopolis, the city of today or so called tomorrow. If you look at by echistic units, how can they be classified? You have physical and social units, where man is the smallest unit, space is the second unit, either personally owned or shared with others. When you talk of space as a secondary unit, it's either personal space. Every surrounding human being has a particular area of a comfort zone where someone comes within that, you're not comfortable. Similarly, when you share a particular area like a neighborhood or an apartment or a house, again that also has a particular comfort zone. Then finally, the third unit is the family home. Social unit is a group of homes. It's the next stage of a town or a city. If you look at this, this is the economopolis, where they believe that all the cities eventually are going to be connected. Megalopolis, a group of large scale cities that you combine, which is a number of conurbations combining together. Each city should have a minimum of 10 million people. It is only then a megalopolis. The next thing is the conurbation, which is the next below level of megalopolis. Then you have the metropolis, which is most of our cities in the country now. Other towns and other classifications that you'll have is a large city, a city with large population and many services, having less than 1 million but over 3 lakh people. The next classification is a city with abundant but not as many as services available in a large city, having over 1 lakh up to 3 lakh people population. A large town has a population of about 20,000 to a lakh. It needn't have as many services as required as that of a city, and it is expected that for any of these services, people would have to go to a closest city. Town, population of 1,000 to 20,000, only the basic structure of a market would be existing. Village, population anywhere from 100 to 1,000. Hamlet, a very small population, less than 100, and very few, if at all there are services. Usually there won't be any services besides a post office or a telephone complex. That's about it. Isolated dwellings, 1 or 2 buildings of families with negligible services, if at all there are services available. Now we'll discuss the kinds of human settlement. You have the rural settlement. The majority of its inhabitants are involved in activities like farming, fishing, forestry and mining. The pattern of rural settlement can vary from a single farm to a cluster of houses. Characteristics of a rural settlement. In the form of a village, it's usually surrounded by farms. Next, small population. Occupation is predominantly forestry, agriculture, fishing, tourism and mining. Service provided is very limited and mostly only for everyday needs. But of course, if it's a tourism oriented town, the services provided would be to a greater degree to satisfy the tourist attractions and the tourist footfall. Close knit communities and the atmosphere is quiet. Dominance of community feeling. Next, you have urban settlement. The majority of people are engaged in non-rural activity. So, it's either manufacturing, industrial or service sector. They work in offices, shops, factories, operate machinery, provide healthcare or other services. Urban settlement can be small, like around 10,000, or it can be as large as Tokyo and Yokohama in Japan with over 30 million people. The characteristics of an urban settlement: in the form of both towns and cities. They are large both in population as well as area. They have functions such as business, manufacturing, government as well as cultural centers. Wide range of services are offered, including specialized concierge service as well. Unlike rural settlements, neighborhood is separate with limited knowledge of others. Traffic and pollution is a problem. So, when community is the ruling principle or characteristic of a rural settlement, here economics is what drives the urban settlement. This is a typical urban settlement, Manila, Philippines. You can see a distinct central business district, crowded residential areas in the outer area, and then you have residences thrown in around. So, it's a complex mix of both the low income groups, middle income as well as the central business district. If you look at the difference in services between rural and urban settlement, its basic service in health would be provided in a rural settlement is a medical clinic. In an urban settlement, it would be a hospital and specialized hospitals in particular diseases and care. Education, you will not have anything more than a primary school. You are expected to travel beyond that. Versus an urban settlement has everything, even including a university. Shopping, you will have basic needs covering general store and a market, versus an urban settlement will be shopping mall. Finance is basically you will have cooperative banks if at all possible, or basic money lenders. In the urban settlements, you will have international banks. Transport is only bus service and pedestrian, versus urban settlements is international airports. So, the kind of nodes and linkages will also vary simultaneously. The basic type of settlement: in the bottom of the pyramid you have isolated dwelling, and top of the pyramid is the conurbation, which is most of our multi-million population towns. So, you have decrease in frequency, increase in size of settlement as well as population and other services. So, as you have your isolated dwelling, your services is least over here, and even the density of population is lower. Hamlet, again density is slightly higher versus the size could be a little larger. So, as the size increases, the density will also increase as well as the frequency, in the sense how many of these occur will decrease. Isolated dwelling, this was about just one or two buildings or families in it. It won't have any services. Usually this is found in far farmlands or mountainous regions. Hamlet is a settlement with a very small population, less than 100, and very few services and few buildings. This is in Philippines. If you go province. Village generally does not have any service in terms of compared to a town or a city. Villages, the people are expected to go to a town to fulfill everything besides their everyday needs. You will just have a corner shop or a small post office. Population is between 100 to 1000. You can still see the importance, nature and the feeling of community is still there. Lack of proper roads, and the houses are individual houses. A small town has a population of 1000 to 20,000. A town is a type of settlement ranging from a few to several thousand inhabitants. Usually a town is the thought of a larger than a village, but it's definitely smaller than that of a city. This is a small town. Usually towns would have a tourism sector of it, because they do offer some kind of services, but they still offer the tranquility and peace of a village. A large town has a population of about 20,000 to 100,000. This again is a historic town of Vigan. Again, a tourist backbone town. Population is also there versus having a floating population and services to support that as well. A city has abundant services, but not as many as that of a large city. Over 100,000 inhabitants is the population consideration. It is an urban area with large population and particularly administrative, legal or historical status. Example is again the Pagadian city in Philippines. Again, you can see the change in the landscape, broader roads, lesser greenery, and even the buildings are increasing in height. You can see the different kind of wires and cables cutting across, and even if tourism wants to be prevalent here, it will be relatively lesser, because the ethnicity and the character of that particular place will reduce as it gets more and more urbanized or globalized. A conurbation is an urban area agglomeration comprising a number of cities, large towns, larger urban areas that through population growth and physical expansion have merged to form one continuous urban and industrially developed area. This can usually be confused with a metropolitan area, but a metropolitan area consists of many neighborhoods, while a conurbation consists of many different metropolitan areas that are connected with one another and are interdependent either socially or even economically. So, if you look at by echistic elements, how are they classified? Nature represents ecosystems including water cycle, biosystems, climatic zones, etc. Anthropos, constantly adapting and changing certain physical and psychological diseases directly associated with urbanization. This include obesity, respiratory problems caused due to pollution, and a sense of alienation or depression caused by lack of community. Society, realm of society comprises all those aspects of urban or rural scene that are commonly dealt by sociologists, economists and administrators. Population trends, social customs, income and occupations, and the system of urban government. Other important echistic elements are shells. The built environment is the traditional domain of architectural and engineering professions. Networks, which provides the glue for all systems of urbanization. Changes profoundly affect urban scale, like advent of the railroad or piped water supplies or the telephone lines, which have affected the extent, texture as well as densities of human settlements. By evolutionary phases, if you have to classify settlements, you have macro scale, which is nomadic, agricultural, urban, urban industrial. Micro scale is specific area at a limited period of time. By factors in discipline, you have cultural disciplines, technical disciplines, political sciences and administration, sociology, economics, and the main echistics, which combines all these factors and is the true study or science of human settlements. If you look at the classification by size, the changing dimensions of human settlements and change in their character from static to dynamic, which gives them different aspects as every day passes, makes these settlements confusing for places to stay as such, because people are not able to relate to that place. They want to escape from there because of the growing size of it. Some mistakenly support the utopian thought of returning to a system of a small city, but they don't know how to do that because we are kind of used to certain facilities and infrastructure. Because we want the advantages that a great city can give to us, but we want the advantages of living in a village and clean atmosphere as well. Feeling that one cannot return to a small city system supports this big city concept, and we do not dare to change the real structure because we don't want to disturb the nuances of a big city, which basically lacks in quality of life. Another major road is to realize that a big city is an inevitable phenomenon. Whether we want it or not, it is definitely going to happen. So basic problem is man wants to have the best of both worlds, let it be the rural world as well as the urban world, but he does not know how to change the phenomenon of that of a big city, which cannot actually be controlled by man. As and as the population grows, as well as technology grows, the city is going to become a big city. The number of big cities and large metropolitan cities are constantly increasing. This is the only realistic road that we can follow. To discuss quality of life or any other important phenomenon in human settlements without referring to their size is actually impossible. So classification by size is the most important as well as useful classification. The confusion caused by the use of small and big, town, metropolis, city, megalopolis is actually very great. If we actually want to avoid it, we must classify all human settlements by size and order to be able to understand and give them values. A small neighborhood with cars running through it loses its values, and a metropolis without meaning of a very fast transportation cannot actually operate. So we have to see what kind of transportation system, what kind of services are there, what kind of size of the city is there. Without any context, if towns start growing without the proper infrastructure, that's where the confusion comes into place, because then we can't randomly only decide what kind of a city or what is the size of the settlement by size, because it could be a small town but the facilities could be large. But if it's a large city without the speedy facilities required, it is pretty much wasted or can be considered only a town. So even though classification by size is very important, it is the growth and provision of services along with the size and supporting the population is equally important. If you look at the 15 levels of ecostic units, right from man single unit to the economopolis, which is 50 million, which is basically the city of tomorrow, where eventually all the cities are going to converge and meet. So 4 basic groups is what we divide it as, where you have a small unit till about a village, then from a neighborhood to a small city, then a small city, large city, metropolis, and then epiropolis is 7,500 million, again a very large population. Now if you look at the quality of human settlements, we can now face the most important question of quality, because a specific unit by first defining its size. A small town, especially in older civilizations, can satisfy many of our aesthetic needs for picturesque streets and squares, and that is exactly why we like it. But most people only want to go there for a vacation. No one wants to go and settle down there because they know that the facilities offered by that place is going to be negligent or not superior quality as a big city or metropolis is going to offer. The facilities could be choice of a job, education, health facilities, better social contacts as well as entertainment. Judgment about quality can be made in several ways in terms of the relation of every individual to his environment, that is, his relation to nature, society, shells and network, the benefit that he gets from these contacts. The great size of the modern city is not what causes the bad quality of environment. Corporations have increased in size even more without any loss in efficiency, and the armies of World War II were able to operate very efficiently despite their unprecedented size and rate of growth. So the problem is actually not only our population growth, but it is our perception of how we can grow our cities and completely ignoring the ecological aspect of it or the environmental aspect of it. That is what hampers the quality of human settlements. The quality of our city expressed in terms of a system in movement is decreasing because we have not been able to reduce the increasing complexity by introducing a higher degree of simplicity as a primitive man has managed to do so. To conclude, study of human settlements should be comprehensive and have interdisciplinary scope related to the 5 ecostic elements. Any study of settlements shall refer to ecostic units of scale from man to ecumenopolis, the 15 levels. Time dimension must be integrated in analysis and design of human settlements from both the past to the present and even to the distant future. The scientific method shall be used in a systematic treatment of human settlements. following the models, concepts, principles, values, and postulations of ecstatics, cities must be treated as a dynamic settlement for which the concept of dynapolis allows for growth and change. Unlike other disciplines or sciences interested primarily only in one element of human settlement, such as society or shells, ecstatics draws upon the knowledge of economics, social science, technical disciplines, cultural disciplines, and two fields of study closely allied to ecstatics are urban geography and regional science. And by drawing knowledge from all these fields, it seeks to draw general conclusions or not only formulate new theories and laws, but also helps us understand the older urban laws and theories, and it will also help to cure the maladies of existing settlements and prevent such ills from happening in future settlements. So, at the end of it, ecstatics not only helps us study the past of settlements, but also helps us study what can go wrong and futuristically even plan our settlements in such a way that we can learn from the past mistakes and incorporate those theories into the planning of future settlements. At the end of this lecture, we have studied nature shells, network and linkages, anatomy and classification of human settlements. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer these following questions. What are the elements of structure in a human settlement? Discuss the extent of human settlements. What are the levels of ecstatics in human settlements? How are human settlements classified based on size? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.